All right, we got John Alite in the house. John, who's former enforcer and hitman for the Gambino family. Is that an okay introduction for you, John?
Yeah, it's a good introduction. It's the truth of what went on in my past.
All right, John, we're gonna start a little bit from the start. I know you're originally from Albania. You was born in the U.S. You grew up on Jamaican Avenue,
Yeah.
Queens, New York.
Yeah.
Tell me a little about that area.
Queens was like a lower middle class neighborhood on the outskirts on each side, probably like a 10-block radius. It goes into lower class neighborhoods. I grew up on the edge of Brooklyn and Queens, and I hustled those streets with my friends. A lot of my friends, since kids were drug dealers, I'm talking about since they're like 11, 12 years old. I wasn't as aggressive as those guys. I was a little more laid back. I was kind of quiet. And later in my teens, I got more involved in the drug business and in street.
Well, Jamaica Avenue is known, correct me if I'm wrong, is known to be, a rough area where the low-income classes live, and there's a lot of crime. The crime rate is higher than the rest of New York.
Yeah, because, like I said, if you went to the Brooklyn side of East New York, it was known to be a lot of Spanish and a lot of drugs there, and that was one of the drug spots. And then in my neighborhood, if you went up to what we used to call the Dome, it was up in the park a couple blocks from my house, 2 blocks. It was a huge drug area. And then if you go to the right, down towards South Jamaica, that was known, serious group of guys, the Supreme Team, and guys like those guys got involved in moving serious drugs. They controlled South Jamaica. So, and, we kind of went from neighborhood to neighborhood ourselves because it was, we were all connected, Jamaica Avenue, from each other. So we knew each other. We hustled, some of us with each other directly, but indirectly, we all hustled together.
In your book, you describe that your dad raised you and your brothers very tough. He raised you actually to be fighters. How was that? When he, for example, when he wanted to discipline you and your brother, was it like,
He used to make appointments to beat us up when he came home. I mean, listen, we're Albanians, so we grew up in a very traditional Albanian household. And Albanians are known to be very aggressive. The fathers, most of them are out on the street gambling, hustling, smoking cigarettes, playing dice. There's a lot of Albanians that go to work, but in my culture, they really weren't. They were more hustlers. And my father was a typical Albanian father. He'd come home and beat you up if your mother told you that there was problems in the house, one of your uncles or, your grandparents said that you were being bad. He'd call up and he'd say, I'll be home at 2 in the morning, wait for me. And so you'd be waiting for your beating till he got home. That was just our culture. So we were used to violence, so it's funny, but it really isn't funny. But, it was just part of growing up.
Did your father, your dad, did he associate with any made guys from the area?
My father grew up in Lower East Side of Manhattan, and that's where Vito Genovese, a very famous gangster, grew up. They knew each other. And my father's childhood partners were Charlie Luciano, who was the cousin of Charlie Luciano, Lucky Luciano. One was Lucky and the other cousin was Blackie, who stayed with my father. So I was around these gangsters, Al Greco, another very famous gangster on the Jersey side that was friends with my father, who's actually just came home from years of being away from murders. He's in his 80s somewhere, tough guy.
Did he encourage you to seek the environment, or did he wanted you to stay away from it?
No, he brought me, he liked the environment. He just thought I could be like him. Hang out with these guys, gamble with these guys, do some business with these guys. But he never thought that I'd be the guy that would become the killer for these guys. So when he took me to his barbershop, the guy that owned the barbershop was a made guy, and he was running numbers. And so he'd bring me there. He'd bring me to the Bronx, where he had a 3-card Monte game. It's Spanish Harlem, basically, where they were at outside of Spanish Harlem, but it was a Spanish crew of players. And it was, I don't know, back in those days, it was big, big money. And my uncle was one of the dealers, so he would brag that he was making more money than Reggie Jackson in the 70s. Whatever Reggie Jackson was making, he used to make more. So it was serious money. There was money, serious money on the table, and serious gangsters would be there. You know, the bosses from different families would be there, and they all knew me, and, you know, I'd call them uncle. And so I've been around gangsters since I'm a baby.
You also describes that the violence started very early. At first, you know, it was just fighting with fists. Then later on, you started using bats and knives. At what age did you start using weapons?
Well, like I said, one of my friends at the time was Johnny Gebbett. He was on the David Susskind show for violence and drugs at, I believe, 11 or 12 years old. And at that time, he was already using guns and selling drugs and stabbing guys. Later on, I order his death. My cousin kills him. He raped a girl with a couple of guys, so I killed him. I had him killed from prison. So those guys started very young. I started probably about where I started using bats and stuff at about 15 or something like that, 16.
What changed since you started using those kinds of weapons?
You know, you're staying with guys like my little girlfriend. I talked about her at the time. Her father and uncle were made guys with the Lucchese family. I worked for the uncle. Obviously, the father was nice to me on the taxi stand because I was running around with his daughter as kids, you know. And at that time, you know, I was a sharp little kid. I knew they were wise guys because I've been around them with my father since I'm 3 years old. So I knew when you see them. A lot of kids will say, I didn't know what they did for a living. Of course we knew. We're street kids. We're growing up in the street. We know exactly what they did. My baseball coach's father was the boss in our neighborhood, so I knew exactly what all these guys did. I looked up to it, you know. And back in those days, you drove Caddies and Lincolns, and, you know, they dressed well. Everybody smoking cigars, and, you know, so I took to it. You know, I wanted to be like that. That's what I was brought up in front of.
Makes sense. Do you remember the first time you used a bat or knife on somebody?
The first time I actually used a bat was for this guy, Gaddy, who I was talking about, my girlfriend's uncle. And he would ask me, I worked in a delicatessen, and everybody that came in the deli were his runners. They used the payphone. In the back in those days, they all used payphones. Nobody had, you know, they had beepers, I think, later on. Even at that time, I don't think they even had beepers. But they used payphones, and I'd run slips and money across the street to the bookie office. And at one time, somebody didn't pay. I mean, constantly somebody didn't pay. But if they were, you know, I explained this, you don't get a beating just because you didn't pay. You usually get a beating for a reason. In other words, if you bet with George the week before and you just collected $12,000, and now this week you lose $3,000, you say you don't got it, you better have it.
Yeah.
There is no give me $300 a week or $500 till you pay me. That's for a guy that didn't lose money, didn't win money, and you came up empty. You're paying every week, and then this week you lost $2,000, and, you know, they got patience for you and say, okay, what do you got? Give me $500, and then we'll work it out with you. But a guy that does that gets the beating, and eventually that was a case with one of the guys, and George asked me to go see him, and this is the first time anybody asked me to hurt anybody. And he says, you know, put a bat across his head for me. And I says, yeah, no problem. And, you know, I was young, and I was, you know, it's okay to say that you're going to do it until you got to do it. And, you know, you have butterflies. And if somebody tells you they don't have butterflies, they're a liar.
It's a lie.
You could talk about professional guys or guys that fight, get in a ring. I get in a ring. Doesn't matter if you know you could destroy the guy. At the beginning, you can have a couple butterflies until you start, you know, the fight itself.
That's a normal fear in every human being. What did you do with that fear? How did you, like, push it away in order to do what you had to do?
You learn that there's
Not
two.
not only in that occasion. Sorry to interrupt you. Not only in that occasion, but throughout, your violence.
I didn't recognize it myself. I just learned that I would overcome the fear by being very aggressive. So I played through the fear. Once I started feeling the fear, I wanted to go get it done quicker.
Okay.
Because I wanted that feeling to go away.
Okay.
And then once I did it, or I started to do it, you don't even think about it. It's just second nature. You just hurt guys, and that's it. And I didn't realize how I was getting, because you don't see yourself in the mirror. You're living this life, you're making money, you're being obedient to your bosses. And then guys started talking about me, saying I was fearless.
You're in the fast lane.
Yeah, and you don't realize. But, now I see my friends that I used to listen to, that they're starting to listen to me. I'm starting to take charge of them. And they would say, this guy's crazy, he's fearless.
So let's say, for example, the first time you batted that guy, how'd you feel afterwards? You didn't feel nothing?
No, I was happy, actually. I wanted to go back. And, it's like a dog. He does something good, he goes to the bathroom, you give him a biscuit. So, I wanted to go back and get my biscuit. So, I wanted to go back and say that I did what I said because I wanted them to like me. I wanted to get the approval that, this guy is serious, we can trust this kid. And that's exactly what happened. The more I did, the more they trusted me, the more they asked me to go do it.
How old were you at that time?
Young, 15 or 16, maybe 17 at tops, but I think I was younger.
Yeah. Because at 17, you get...
Yeah, I was a little younger. I was about 15.
Yeah. Because at 17 years old, you got stabbed yourself.
I had stabbed at about 18 or 19, actually. At 17, I went to Florida on a baseball scholarship, but I was always in trouble. I was getting locked up a lot even there. And it was hard to control me. I was a baseball player, and I started using the bat on the street, not just on the baseball field. But, I was the captain of my baseball team in high school for the junior and senior year, and I was good with a bat, all joking aside. I used to play with the bat all day. I would sleep with a baseball bat and a glove. I loved baseball. I wanted to be a pro ball player. And I would do a lot of tricks with the bat because I was a big bunter. I learned how to bunt, and I wanted to follow guys like Phil Rizzuto that played for the Yankees, and he was great with a bat. And I started to be able to handle a bat with one hand, switch hitter, different things, and I started using that bat very controlled on the street. And that was a big mistake in my life because once I had the confidence to know how fast I was very quick. I was fast, which people think you got to be big and bulky. That's actually wrong. The quicker and the faster you are, if you see great fighters, they're very fast. Sugar Ray Leonard and guys like that, Muhammad Ali. People talk about Tyson, but they don't talk about his speed, and that's what made him an incredible fighter.
It's all about the speed and timing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what happened the time that you got stabbed?
It hurt.
It hurt?
No, what happened was...
But what led up to the incident?
I was driving, I was coming home. I was always at night, moving around at night. I don't sleep good, but at night, especially then, I do my routes of where I had drugs in different areas. And I was down in Brooklyn, and I had, at that time, I believe one of my vets, I had a Corvette. I always had convertibles. I like convertibles. And I was driving, I ran into a girl that knew me. And I said, where you going? She said, I was going home. I said, get in. The streets were dead that night. And we went down into Ozone Park. And I said, let's go to White Castles, we'll get something to eat. And, we were going to go get something to eat, and we were going to go back to my house and fuck around and whatever. So on the way in, I met a couple guys out front. I started talking to them. She went inside to get me burgers, and one of the guys, they were drunk. They had beers with them, and one of the guys grabbed her, playing around. The other guy dropped his pants and, mooned her, whatever.
Yeah,
The guy's fucking around, trying to break balls.
White boys fun, I call it.
Yeah. Well, the white boys fun, and I went in to go talk to them about what they did. But, again, I'm aggressive, and there was 5 or 6 of them, I don't know. And I went in, I hit one of the guys as soon as I walked in. And one of them hit me, and then one guy stabbed me in the head. and then I stabbed one of the guys. And then the fight ensued after that, and then I got stabbed again. I left. I jumped in the car. Everybody jumped in the car, but I was real bad actually. But you know, you got adrenaline. You don't realize, and my head was double the size. I guess because they punctured something with an ice pick in my head. And I looked at one of my friends, and I says, "How's my head?" Because he was one of the guys that was outside, and he was. You could see his face was scared. And later on, my head exploded to double the size. And you're a
Oh,
kid, you
man.
don't realize that you can die from that.
It was so bad,
Oh
bro.
yeah. I was in a hospital over a month.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was emergency surgery, and I needed surgery on my pancreas. I got stabbed. I got stabbed in the head. I broke my arm. They hit me with a car later on. Baseball batted me because the incident after that, we were driving home. They hit me with a truck on the way home. They jumped a divider, and they jumped out and baseball batted me. And,
Who were you fighting with, bro?
what's that?
Who were you fighting with?
Another crew of guys from another side of the neighborhood. They were around people too, supposedly. And you know the crazy thing is, after they did all that, I still got off the ground and got the bat and baseball batted one of them, and then I collapsed. So that guy also went to the hospital. The guy I stabbed earlier, he was in the hospital, and we all get to the hospital. I'm going emergency surgery, and my father shows up with a couple of guys, and then he hits a guy, and a fight pursues in the hospital emergency section. Police were there, and one of the guys that were head of security at that time of the hospital was my father's friend. So he actually jumps in. He's supposed to be security, stopping everything. He jumps in for us, and he's fighting too. So it was just...
It was a mess, man.
It was a mess. So I ended up going into emergency surgery handcuffed. They handcuffed me on the way in, and one of the doctors was screaming at the police to take the handcuffs off me, before surgery. So they had me handcuffed to one of the, whatever they call them, gurneys, I guess, or something.
So most people, John, when they experience something that traumatic, they're like, okay, I almost lost my life. Maybe I'm gonna go do something else. Maybe I'm gonna move to another city. Maybe I'm gonna settle down with a sweet girl, find a job, etc., etc. What did you do?
What I did was take all the tubes out of my body in a couple of weeks without the doctors knowing. Called one of my friends and told him, come get me so I could go shoot the guys that did that to me. So, which I did. And I almost killed myself by doing that. And then my friend brought me back to the hospital, and the doctor obviously didn't know why I took all the tubes out and left. And he says, if you ever do that again, we won't admit you back to the hospital, which I ended up back in emergency in what is that, the ICU.
Yeah.
I almost killed myself by doing that.
So was that your first time shooting somebody?
I don't know, no. Prior to that, we shot, I wasn't the shooter, I was a driver. We shot a gang of Jamaicans that robbed Gotti's son and his partner, the guy Gebbet, the rapist guy that we killed later on. They robbed their drug business. So they asked me to go do the shooting.
Okay, so we have two scenarios here. We got one scenario that's business related, and we got another incident that's definitely personal related. What drove you more when you had to do some shooting? Was it the business or the personal?
Well, the business is no choice. You're gonna, business. You gotta, when you get told or asked to do something, you gotta do it. The personal is, I think you become a little more violent. Instead of shooting a guy, once or twice, maybe you're gonna shoot him 6 times because you're mad, and it's a little more personal. So, it just depends. I mean, I think that as you keep getting older and you're getting, I don't want to use the word good at it, but you're getting used to doing it, you become a little more professional about doing it. How you do it. Any idiot can go hurt somebody, but any idiot's going to get caught or any idiot's going to get killed. You're not going to last out here. So you got to have alliances, friendships. I think, what's missed the most in a lot of my interviews is they're always talking about the Italian mafia. But the difference between me is I have 1 million black and Spanish friends. I have friends from every country. I mean, people see me now. I move from country to country. I have groups and gangs of guys from every country. Just here in Denmark, we're here, and my partner's here. We're in prisons together. He's well known here. There's movies about him. We did shows like Crime Watch here, and most of the guys in the street. It's like me being at home, almost being here, because I have a lot of friends here from his connections, people that know me here, Albanian culture. I'm huge in the Albanian culture, so we have guys in every country. And they don't talk about that. They're always talking about the Italian mafia every time I talk to somebody. But really, I've said it over and over again, there's always a certain amount of tough guys and intelligent guys in every organization.
I understand.
So in the Italian mafia, you probably got 3% that are really legitimately tough guys. The other 97%, I say it all the time, are cowards. They were followers.
Yeah. That's the structure of any crime organization, if you look at it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would be very fragile. Everybody would, every leader will be in jail.
Well, you got to go outside their little neighborhoods. And the thing about the organization I was involved in, they never leave the neighborhood. Forget about leave the country. You ever see any of these guys but besides myself? I mean, think about one guy. Do you know him in any other country? Anybody from the States? Do they travel around other countries? Do they know anybody? Do they got any real hooks? They don't have them. I says, because they're just small-time guys in a small neighborhood. They might make a couple of bucks in that area, but they don't have any real connections to leave. They can't go into Switzerland or Germany or Greece or Albania or anywhere else. They don't have any hooks. Brazil, or you name the country, we have hooks there. Africa.
I heard a guy like Sammy Guevara who doesn't even leave Arizona.
I gotta laugh. He still owes me fucking $3,000. I said I'm going to embarrass the piece of shit till he pays back the $3,000. This is supposed to be an underboss. This is what I'm talking about. What kind of underboss can't pay $3,000 back? I mean, you're supposed to be a gangster. You're hiding. I don't know what people are looking at. They listen to these bullshit stories these guys tell.
At this time, Andy, a.k.a. Fat Andy, was controlling the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Was he the one who saw the potential in you and was like, this guy is gonna be an asset for the Gambinos. Let's keep him close to us.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I grew up with him a little kid. I know him since I'm, I don't know, a baby. And I was in his house, and his son was my baseball coach, and I was involved with them. And his other son actually came on a podcast with me. I brought him in, Anthony. And Anthony tells that story. He says his father told him since I was around the house, this kid's a killer, meaning me, So when guys question or say stupid things, it's not me saying it. It's the father, the son, my ability of what I used to do around them. There's guys, there was a little jockey kid around Roy Greco, Bobby Greco, excuse me, Roy's the other brother. And, you get trolls on there, and they talk, the kid became a crackhead. He was, he hung around with us. He used to do some robbery with us later on in Kennedy Airport and things. But a small-time guy. Later on, he's homeless. He's living in a car. And, supposedly he became a snitch, and he ran. I don't know if that's true or not, but he was hiding from us. But then they make comments of things. But, when guys are real, they talk up front. They sit in front of you. They have a conversation. These guys all, it's like the commercial. You can be all you want to be in the Marines because they're talking behind a screen now. This is what they get to do. They don't have the balls to do the things that we've done. And they scribble and write something. And, people don't really know, what's accurate and what isn't. This is a problem.
Today it's easy. It's the internet. Everybody can sit down and type and write what they like, John.
Well, they use a saying, right? Somebody used it, and I use it all the time now. They talk about, the internet Rambos.
Yeah, I like that expression.
Because I get a lot of guys. I was in Philadelphia. There was a black guy. He runs around with a camera and a microphone. He did a couple of years in prison. I don't know what he did. And he rah-rah talks about snitches.
Is that the clown who's like following you on
No,
one time?
that's another guy.
Okay.
But these guys are all the same, because if you believe in what you're saying, right? You really believe in what you're saying. Then I told this kid from Philadelphia, I go, you run around with a camera. You videotape and record what everybody's saying. But you don't call yourself a snitch. But just in case that you want to be that gangster, why aren't you in the street with a pistol and going to kill those guys you're talking about?
Because it's easy to hold up a camera.
Yeah, it's easy, not a pistol.
Yeah.
Go out there and do your work. You want to be that man? Go ahead. No one's stopping you. So, these guys, to me, are such fucking insecure clowns. And they talk about their, 3-year bids or 5-year bids or whatever the hell they did. Who cares? You're not impressing nobody. I said, so, I don't care if you do whatever amount of time you did, you did. No one gives a shit.
Paul Castellano. He took over, I think, Carlo Gambino, who died of old age.
Yeah.
Now, that's different opinions on Castellano being the head of the Gambinos. Can you explain why?
Listen, I loved John Gotti, the father, right? I liked it. People say, why? I was a kid at the time. I looked up to him. I liked a lot of things about him. He grew up in the neighborhood next to my neighborhood. He went to the same high schools I went to. He grew up hard without anything like I did. So I had a lot that I related myself to him with. But as a money maker, he wasn't. I mean, you got to be honest, what he was, and some of the good things, some of the bad things. Some of the good things, he knew how to manipulate every guy in the street. He had 3/4 of the guys around him were I hope, can I curse on there?
Yeah, curse all you want.
3/4 of the guys that stayed around him were cunts. He told them to lick their shoes, they did. They talk different now. Guys like Sammy talk bullshit. But I was there firsthand, and I watched how everybody kissed his ass. Since I'm a kid, I watched how everybody kissed his ass. Paul Castellano was a different kind of leader. He was a billionaire businessman, personal and for the Gambino family. So as a leader of a company, whether it's Merrill Lynch or IFronten or one of these banks, Paul Castellano was a sharp guy that brought a ton of power because of money. But a misconception about Paul is that he wasn't a killer. He was a killer, not by his own hand, but he ordered murders more than John Gotti ordered. So when people say, Paul he didn't order murders, oh yeah, he did. He ordered a ton of murders. He ordered 20-something murders. And he had one of the biggest prolific killers around him was Roy DeMeo. So when people talk about Paul Castellano, he kept a hit squad around him. Gadji, Patty Tester, I know these guys. Anthony Senta, I grew up around these guys since I'm a baby, around Patty Tester more than the rest of them, because I used to go hang around his call lots.
Because when you hear people from the mafia talk about him, they're like, he wasn't no gangster, he was a businessman. But what I'm hearing you saying is that he actually had things done when things had to be done. He actually killed more people than John Gotti killed.
100%. He wasn't.
So,
these guys, there's a difference between, I'll give you an example, Paul Castellano and Pete Gotti. Pete Gotti was John Gotti Sr.'s brother. He was a sanitation worker. He wasn't a money maker. He wasn't a killer with his own hand. He wasn't a killer by ordering murders. He was a nice guy, but a dumb guy. There's a complete, there's good leaders and there's shitty leaders. Some guys didn't like Pete's personality. I like Pete, but he wasn't a gangster. He was put there to collect money for his brother from prison. That's it. So when people hear about, this guy was a made guy, this guy was a boss, that title don't mean shit. I says, what you need is respect in the street from real gangsters. Because if you're going to tell a gangster like Jimmy Burke, a different family than Pete Gotti, and a different era. Pete doesn't get made till later on in life, and Jimmy's gone in prison. But he's never going to be able to tell Jimmy Burke what to do, an Irishman. Never. Ain't going to happen. There's not going to be no respect there.
What did you personally think of Paul becoming boss?
Paul Castellano, in my opinion, should have stayed as boss, and he should never have been killed. But it wasn't my choice.
Also, at that time, did you had that opinion at that time?
100%. Paul kept a good close contact and association with the Genovese family because he brought them money. So when you bring them money, that's why they weren't happy, for the reason the Lucchese family weren't happy when John made the move and killed Paul. And then they started killing our guys. And we never retaliated. So people don't understand, like when Sammy Gravano or somebody talks nonsense and he talks about gas pipe being, he wasn't a tough guy, he was a dummy. Well, then you got to ask Sammy. They killed all our guys. You guys didn't retaliate. Why not?
Try to walk us through. How did they kill Paul?
Paul was set up by Frankie DeChico. They set a meeting up at Sparks Steakhouse in the city of 46th Street, excuse me. I think Sparks between 2nd and 3rd Avenue. But they set a meeting to talk to him about things that were going on with our faction of guys, the Gotti faction, the drug business, and they were trying to settle a problem with Angelo Ruggiero at the time, was one of Gotti's best friends, grew up since they're kids, got caught on tapes with Gotti's brother Genie, Johnny Koenig, different guys, Tony Roach, Michael Corio, one of the attorneys. And they all got caught in the middle of a thing. Listen, we all deal drugs. We all know we're dealing drugs. But if you get caught dealing drugs, you're supposed to get killed.
So that's what people are like talking about these days. It's like everybody know that John set Paul up to get shot.
Yeah.
Did he do it because he knew that Paul would eventually kill him because of the drug dealing?
Never. I'll stop you there. Paul had 2 cases at the time. He had RICO cases, and he had the commission case going with the rest of the 5 families. They were all being indicted and charged with RICO within the 5 families controlling the construction industry and other charges, slew of charges. He didn't have the ability to kill John Gotti at that time. And second, he didn't have the timing to kill John Gotti or Angelo Ruggiero or anybody. But he had so much pressure on him for 2 cases. And also, they just killed Roy DeMeo shortly before that. So he didn't have his murder machine like he had before. He didn't have the ability at that time, for so many reasons, to kill anybody. What he might have done, and John's too smart for everybody else, he might have shelved John. In other words, said, you're not recognized as a made guy in this family anymore, and you're ostracized and chased away. I think that was John's fear. John sold the murder on the rest of the guys, saying that he's going to kill us and blah, 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 let's kill him first. Because John's intentions were to take over the family. Now, when John makes that move, I give him a lot of credit. This is why I said there's things I like about John. He knew how to maneuver his guys. He also knew how to maneuver guys that were outside of our guys. So when Sammy Gravano tells the story that he was the one that set up the hit of Paul Castellano, that's a fucking lie, an out-and-out lie.
He said that he sat in the car with John, supervising the kill.
If he was with John, he was 5 blocks away first. But let me go back to the murder itself. John hardly knows Sammy Gravano at that time. He met him a handful of times. He needs a guy in Brooklyn who's Frankie DeChico, who's going to be the underboss of the family after we hit Paul. Who the DeChicos, Georgie DeChico, Frankie DeChico, Butter DeChico, Joey, that's his real name. These are all legendary mob guys, right? The brothers are Joey not, but Joey was very close. Obviously, he's the brother. When John needs to hit somebody, no different than you or me, we go in our inner circle. We ask our family, we ask our best friends. You're not going to trust some outsider like Sammy to set up the biggest murder in the history and at the risking your life with a guy you don't know. John had plenty of his own killers around to set up the murder himself. He's never going to go to an outsider to set up the murder. It's ridiculous. So when Sammy tries to claim that he's the one that set up this whole hit thing, it's a fucking blatant lie. Anybody with any kind of normal, logical thinking.
Do you think he's disappointed that he got left out of it?
Yeah, because he was only a made guy at the time. You know, people don't know the history. Sammy was with the Colombo family before the Gambino family. His friend Louis Mileto brought him in and saved his life because Colombo family wanted to hit him. They didn't trust him. He brought him over to Gambino family as a favor, and they straightened him out to save his life. So this is not a guy that was out on the street for the Colombo family killing anybody, doing anything. This is not a guy that John Gotti personally liked or knew. He wasn't over his house, sleeping in his house like I was. He wasn't a guy that John would say, oh, I'm going to risk my life from. John didn't trust him more than he didn't trust his enemies. John knew that he was a weasel. John knew that from day one. But John knew that he can use him. When the hit, after the hit of Paul Castellano, Sammy Gravano was just a made guy. Frankie DeCicco becomes the underboss, and Frankie Lucasio from the Bronx becomes the consigliere, and John's the boss. When Frankie DeCicco is blown up in a car, John needs somebody in the Brooklyn faction to step up. Then he steps up Sammy Gravano to a captain's position. He doesn't step up later on for another year or two before he becomes somebody John needed an acting boss, an acting underboss. He needed an underboss. Frankie Lucasio refused the position. So he had to give it to somebody he knew was fucked with the other faction because they killed Paul Castellano. So he's the best way I can say it is, he's the Kamala Harris to Joe Biden.
Yeah.
You just fit the bill for that place, and that's it. And he knows he could push you around and you got nowhere to go without him.
Now, what surprised me a lot was that no one in the Gambino retributed against the killing of Paul. It was like you all agreed on it. And
Because
we all know the worst.
Because I'll explain that too.
It's more like, John, you know, the main rule in Cosa Nostra is like, you can't kill a boss. We don't care what the reason is. The commission has to greenlight the kill, and the commission hadn't greenlighted the kill. So,
well, John Smart, he also takes this also. So for the people who don't know, Joey Scopo grew up with the Gottis. He was Jeannie Gotti's best friend. He grew up around John. He looked up to John. John took him and the Colombo family and made another faction of the Colombo family and said, you're the boss of the Colombo family. So the war, there was a war going on between three factions of the Colombo family. There was him, there was a guy, Andrew Russo, that took over a faction, and then there was Persico that had the third faction. So John, on account of the commission, says, we're the Gambino family, we okayed the murder. He's the Colombo family, Joey Scopo, he okays the murder. And he goes to the Bonanno family, who's Joe Messina, and he says, you okay it too, and we're going to let you back in the family, in the commission, because they got kicked out because of drugs. So he gets the 3 counts that he needs, although the Genovese family, Lucchese family, and the legitimate party, Persico, of the Colombo family says, this guy's just maneuvering bullshit. We're not accepting anything. So in retaliation for that murder, the Gambino family within itself there's 2 factions. The older faction doesn't have the ability to retribute John or Frankie DeCicco. All the young guys from each neighborhood, Frankie Lucasio controls the Bronx, John controls Queens, Frankie DeCicco controls Brooklyn and Staten Island. They didn't have the ability to kill John. And if they did, John called in all the older captains and told them, retire the ones he didn't trust. The other ones, if you make a move, we're going to kill you. So they sat down on their hands and they didn't do anything about it. But now you had to deal with the bosses of the Genovese family. You had to deal with the boss of the Lucchese family. So when Sammy Gravano goes on these podcasts and talks bullshit, they killed Frankie DeCicco. We didn't do anything. They killed Eddie Lino.
they blew him up in a car.
Yeah, Eddie Lino, they killed him with the corrupt cops, Ippolito and Caracola. We didn't do anything. They killed Bobby Borriello, my friend, in front of his house. They didn't do anything. So our guys were getting killed. They killed Joey Scopo in front of his house, in front of his family.
Was this the Genovese?
Genovese and the Lucchese family, both in connection together, they're close, started hitting all our guys. So when Sammy Gravano talks about, I'm the gangster, I'm a gangster, I'm a gangster, you're not a gangster. You didn't kill anything. You hid. You're still hiding. if you want to be that guy that you're rah-rahing about, then you need to use your pistol and kill. So, when these guys are selling these dreams, no different than Sammy sitting in Arizona, and you got so many people in the Gotti family, all the brothers, all the cousins, all the brothers, they all want to talk their gangsters, and they want to use that name. Why is that guy alive? If it was my father, I'd walk to Arizona and I'd shoot him in his head 100 times. You're not going to let my father die suffering in jail and cancer and leave him alive. So when they talk their gangsters, it's just all talk. This is blah, blah, blah talk, because gangsters don't behave like that. If you're a legitimate guy, I understand. Then you're a legitimate guy, and you don't got to do anything.
If you're really planning to do something to someone, John, you don't even give him a hint about it.
That's why I said they talk. These guys talk without any actions. History is actions. Did you perform? Sammy Gravano is sitting there talking nonsense, but in his own words, go do the research. He only shot or killed one guy. One. So people ain't looking. One.
We're going to talk a little about Sammy later. Now, your relationship was more with John Gotti Jr.
Not really. It was really more with Senior, but John Gotti Jr., the father, put us around the son to legitimize him as a gangster.
How did you meet Junior? How did you become friends with him?
They were from the neighborhood above us, and I'm from the neighborhood below. But when the boss of our neighborhood's Andy Ruggiano, and he goes to prison. And for the people who don't know who Andy Ruggiano is, he's a guy that gets straightened out with Albert Anastasia and Murder, Inc. in the 50s. So this is a serious guy that was out doing a lot of work. He was a killer. He was legitimate, respected by every family. But he caught a big sentence. So when he goes away, we got a new boss. It's John. And now we all got to answer the new boss. So it's just like any other business. You work for any company, any store, and a new owner buys it. You work for the store, there's your boss. And John's our boss.
So there's been a lot of, talk about whether you were connected to Senior or Junior. But it's very easy to answer, actually. Who'd you answer to Senior or Junior?
I was what they call the regime, and I answered to Senior. Everybody answered to Senior.
Yeah.
Everybody has a go-between.
That's it.
The bosses don't talk directly to guys under them. But in my case, I was in his house. In my case, I'm in his daughter's wedding party. In my case, I'm picking him up for court. There's a famous video. I'm picking up Gotti Sr. In my case, I'm sleeping at his house. I'm not the average guy. I became the family guy, that go-to guy to hurt guys, baseball bat guys, stab guys. I tell people, if it ain't me, ask who else was doing a baseball bat and stabbing and different things. So when you look at the trial minutes of my case, they blamed all the murders on me and his father. It only takes $500 for somebody to get a lawyer and see if that's true. If you read Forbes magazine, they did a 30 or 40-page article on me. In that magazine, Gotti's lawyer says, no one could control me. I was too dangerous, too violent. That's his lawyer saying it 10 years later after the trial. So it's not for the purpose of the trials. That I was too dangerous, too violent. The only one that could control me is Gotti Sr. And obviously Gotti Sr. liked me because I'm selling drugs all over the neighborhood. I'm shooting everybody. And if he didn't like me, he didn't want me to do it, I would have been in pieces all over the neighborhood.
At what point or incident did it become clear to you that you were part of that family, like you belonged to them in a family way?
In the early mid-'80s, right before Paul Castellano was hit, Gotti, the father, sent his brothers Richie and Pete to my house because I wasn't showing up at the club for a couple of days. I'm a young guy. I'm only about 23 years old.
Yeah.
And then I understood this guy does pay attention to everything I'm doing. I'm just not some young guy hanging around the club and hanging out, taking care of his son. I'm a guy that the father is recognizing that I'm not there, even though I thought he wasn't paying attention, obviously, because his brothers told me, my brother wants to know where you're at. And I go, what do you mean?
They came knocking on your door?
They came knocking on my door. My grandmother answered the door. I came out. I was very friendly with, obviously with all of them. And I said, I didn't think he gave a shit if I was there or not. And he says, Then I understood it was my job to be there constantly. I had to be there 10:30 in the morning every day, and I leave when he tells me to leave. If I'm at dinner with my girlfriend or wife later on, then he calls me, he texts me they don't call you back in those days, they hit you on a beeper. And they used to put in, our club was on 98th Street, so they put in 98-101 on the beeper, so it means you get to the club. When he wants you, it doesn't matter, you're on a 24/7 call. And that means you're active day and night, you don't own your own life.
At this time, now John is boss of the Gambinos. And we all knew John as being very flashy, friendly with the media, always smiling. But we also know that the mafia, has always been moving very slow or very precautious to avoid, the attention from the authorities. So what did the rest of the families or you guys who were next to him, how did you react to, all this media stuff? I think the media, they gave him a name, the Teflon Don or something. It was like they had a romance relationship between them. Why did nobody do something about that?
They're too scared of John. John, listen, I got sunglasses on. John used to say, sunglasses are only for fucking rats. He hated them. He didn't like sunglasses. But then he's wearing sunglasses. So, this is the hypocrisy of the mob, right? This is just, it's not that he believes that. It's just a control thing. He wants to make sure that he can control you. He didn't like convertibles, but I'm driving a Corvette convertible. He didn't like fast boats, but he had a cigarette boat. We all had cigarette boats. We all, this is just, we're not supposed to deal drugs. We all deal drugs. I'm in the bookmaking business. I'm his partner in the bookmaking business. He brings me, I had the New York Mets that used to gamble with me. I had different people that gamble with me, and I couldn't control that kind of money. It was just too much money for me to control. So I went on a half sheet with him and his partner, Willie Boy Johnson. And then he would give me, John himself would give me his players. He'd give me the Lizard Brothers. These guys were very wealthy businessmen. He would get, and he started bringing me customers to come through me. And then I'd call, and he did it as a favor to make me money because these are big players. They're playing 100,000, 200,000 on a weekend. But I'd call it into his office, and if they win, his office pays, and then I'm in the black. But if they lose, I get half that money. So these are gestures he does to make me money because obviously he likes me and obviously I'm making money for him also. So when, some of the perks, like people always say, well, how much did you get paid for a hit? It doesn't work like that in the mob. But this is how it works. Your payback is stuff like this. He's handing you serious money. So on a weekend, you can make yourself $100,000 in the sports business.
But the question is, why did nobody rebel against, the relationship and the flashy act that he put on?
Look, because John would tell a guy, serious killers, a lot of them grew up with them since they're kids, so they're already intimidated from. Other guys that he starts bringing in, he'll tell them, pick me up at my house. He used to come to the club at about 11 o'clock in the morning usually. He didn't get up too early. He'd be out all night playing cards and partying in clubs like Rishi. He was a fun guy to go out with, liked to party, liked to drink, and he liked to joke around for the people that don't know. But on the other hand, in the morning he was cranky, especially when business came. And he would tell guys, pick me up at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock. He'd say 10 o'clock. We know he doesn't come to the club till 11, 11:30. So he'd make them sit outside for an hour and a half. Not because he was intentionally late. I mean, by accident late. He was intentionally late. He just wanted to show them he could control them any which way he felt like controlling them. And they're just intimidated. All of them can say what they want. Guys do a lot of talking now, but they're full of shit. And, most of these guys aren't workers. People think they're all gangsters, because they're smoking and a cigar. I could show you a picture of guys. I go through the Gambino family, and I'm telling you, they never did a robbery. They never did a murder. They ain't drug dealers. They're dead broke. They find one sucker they get their hands on that gives them money, and they live off that. I mean, they're all frauds. This is why I don't respect them, because they don't act like gentlemen. I says, they're not about that, And now, especially now, there's cameras everywhere. If you weren't about that when there was no cameras, you didn't all of a sudden grow balls and want to kill or do anything like that when there's cameras.
At this time, did you understand the lies and the betrayal that came with that level on the streets?
Sure, there's times like when you're a kid, you get mad at your father and you're like, oh, I hope he die. I hope you're a kid. Then obviously you don't hope that. But you're getting mad at John the same way. You love the guy, but you're mad at him too because you know that he's doing things you shouldn't be doing. But especially me, I'm a kid. I'm like, I can't say anything. But I'm looking at these older guys, just what you're saying. I'm saying, you fucking ballsless bastards, all of you. I'm thinking it. And then I'm seeing as I continue, I'm seeing the way they're treating me. I see they're all afraid of me. I see they're intimidating me. I see that, and I'm talking about the older guys now. But I know it's because John's setting the tone and letting them know, this guy's not you guys. He's out there doing things. Whatever way he's expressing that to them, he is.
How was John and Paul's relationship before he killed him?
John never liked Paul. John's was a rough guy. Like, he was just rough. The way he talked, the way he acted, the way he presented himself. He was straight in your face. He was just John. There's a lot of good things about him, I got to say. That, you look at him, you like him, then there's a lot of things you say, like, what the fuck is he thinking? But when you have guys, and there's so many of them, tell you how much they love him, and, there's a nice guy, this guy Jackie D'Amico, nice guy, became an acting boss, not a gangster. Another guy, just a loyalty guy to John. He was dead broke his whole life. John put him in position. He was friendly with the Gambino section of the family, so he's kind of like a concierge where he can maneuver guys. But when John, it's very simple to say, this is the life of bullshit in the mafia. When John went to jail because of Sammy, and Sammy moved to Arizona, Sammy can talk all he wants, but you moved to Arizona because you're scared shit. You hid. I joke and I say you hid in a cave like Bin Laden. You hid. You're not that killer that you're trying to say. Or you were stuck around the neighborhood and be that guy, be in everybody's face.
He's an old man now, John.
Well, he's an old man, but an old man only needs a finger. If you're that killer you say you are.
You get softer with the years, John.
But then don't talk the way he talks.
Yeah.
This is what I don't. I don't respect him. But here's what I'm gonna tell you. Jackie D'Amico, you ain't killing nobody. You didn't go kill him. You love John so much. Why don't you fucking do something? Where's all these guys that loved him? Where's all that, and somebody said this, and it's true. Where's all that brother, I love you? They ain't give a fuck about the guy. He's suffering in jail, and none of you gave a shit. None of you are doing nothing about it. Guys are ratting left to right, you do nothing about it. They talk a good game, but they don't do anything about it. So you guys want to be the Gambino family, or do you want to be the Wall Street Gambino family? You want to be the Wall Street white-collar criminals? Just say that. But don't run around like you're killers and they ain't killing shit.
Personally, I'm the type who if I believed in something, and that's the reason why I joined that community, because of a shared belief system, and I saw that belief system was wrecked or cracked, I would start making my precautions. For example, these made men all took an oath. And John, afterwards, for me, the Castellano killing is like the biggest betrayal in the history of Cosa Nostra. The biggest and the worst, because it eliminates, the value that we all took under the oath. That's what's make it special. So if that's not to preserve, that's nothing. We all know the streets and how corrupt the street is. What makes the mafia different and admirable, they were so strict on the oath. So for me, I would have been like, okay, he killed Paul. I know his reasons, but it's still wrong. It still contradicts the codex that we live under. But I can understand why, John, because you're young at this time. And I know that with the killing of Paul Castellano and John Gotti stepping up, becoming the boss, you also stepped up. You also start making a lot of money with John Gotti Sr. So at some point, I understand why,
John kept me out of jail. John saved my life a couple of times. I stabbed a guy in Fort Lauderdale in Pompano. I stabbed him in the throat in front of police right there. I got locked up for it. Richie Raybach was my lawyer at the time. Bobby Kaburk was a friend of John's on another occasion when I assaulted a guy. And I was supposed to get 7 years. I got 1 year because John sent me to Bobby. Bobby had a hook. But in the Fort Lauderdale case, he told Richie Raybach to tell the other lawyer that this kid's with me. And the lawyer conveyed that to another lawyer who told his client, because he ended up living after I stabbed him a couple of times. So John went out of his way for me, and in different ways. Yeah, I had a lot of respect for John, because of what he did for me also. So I owed him in different ways, and he did treat me different than he treated the other guys. There's so many different things I could tell you. On the weekends, we used to have dinner at 4 o'clock, only made guys that would sit at a table. I'm the only one that got a seat at that table that wasn't officially Italian made. So he did things to show the rest of the crew, oh, this guy's special to me. So, when people talk nonsense or no one's perfect. No, you're never going to get a perfect leader. But John had his whole life the ability to get what he wanted. So you gotta give him credit because he did do what he wanted. He wanted to become the boss, and he became the boss. His downfall was he had a lot of weak guys around him that didn't kill for him when they needed to. And they just abandoned him. Just like I said, when he went to jail, these guys could talk all they want. His son could talk, his nephew could talk, his brother-in-laws, his son-in-laws. They're fucking cowards. They were supposed to go. They don't need to have any outside guys to have to kill for them. You got a whole family of men. Not one of you's got the balls to go kill this guy. I says, what is it to go kill a guy? They don't want to get caught. They're fucking cowards. Yeah. They don't want him to business. It's a flight. Well, how about don't fly? I don't like flying. Drive there. Take a train. But you're telling me you can't find this old bastard and go kill him?
It's all calculated with risks, John. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying. While you were being affiliated with the Gambinos, I know you also had a drug business. You were moving heroin.
I wasn't in the heroin business, but they asked me the Gotti and Ruggiero asked me to move heroin. I didn't know heroin. I knew the coke business, and so I started moving heroin because they were moving heroin. They wanted me to develop a heroin business to a multi-kilo business the way they were moving. And I started off small through guards at Rikers Island, which is 25,000 inmates. Plus, those inmates have guys on the street. And the idea was for me to move through a sergeant that I had in there. They would move it inside the prison. The guys in the prison would tell their friends. I would start moving it to them. It didn't work out as well as everybody wanted to, but yeah, I was moving heroin for them besides coke.
I heard you had a lucrative business.
Oh, in the coke business, I was huge. I was moving coke, pot, marijuana, pills.
How much you made a month of that?
Guys always ask that number. It's a hard number to ask because I have a whole organization of guys. So, there's millions being made. How much of that cut we get depends on the month and how much I'm buying and from where I'm buying. But, we're controlling, a couple hundred guys. I have 15 of my own inner guys that I'm giving, a weight to. And then they're giving it to their guys who are giving it to their guys. But if you're not within us, you're not selling within us. And if you're buying cheaper than I am, then I'm going to pull you in and tell you, okay, you're going to give me a connection. We're going to buy you in weight, and we'll give it to you for a little cheaper than you're getting. But if you're not working with us, you're getting shot by us or you're getting hurt by us. So, that belief that somebody tells you somebody is, unless they're moving nothing, small amounts, we left them alone. But if you're moving anything serious and you don't listen to us, you're getting hurt, you're getting robbed by us. And again, millions. I mean, it's just hard to put a number on that.
Yeah, because at this time with John in front, the Gambinos is seen to be the most wealthy and the most powerful crime syndicate in the world. Were you aware of that?
At different times of years, it depends on what family's stronger than the next. But you really don't pay attention because it's not like what people think. We're not all enemies with each other. you might be affiliated with the Lucchese family, and some of my friends were became big members in the Lucchese family, became bosses, and I hung out with them. We didn't hate each other. We made money with each other. It's just so, people have the belief that each family hates each other. If something goes wrong, then we kill each other within each other. We help each other kill each other's family if they ask for a favor. But it's all about money at the end of the day. So it was, Genovese family is a very powerful family, a little more quiet, underground than some of the other families. Over the years, the Lucchese family was very strong. Bonanno family was very strong at one time. Colombo family was. After the 90s, they all started ratting. The whole family got dismantled after the war. Bonanno family, when Joe Messina wore a wire, the boss, 14 captains are ratting. So, it's, the whole regime's ratting. When, same with the same with the Gambino family. I mean, it's not like the movies. People don't realize these guys are all ratting. These are the bosses. So, you have the Gambino family, same thing. You have the son of John Gotti who stood, right? Whether you like him, you don't like him, but he brought the FBI in 1998 to the father.
You called him a spoiled brat.
Well, he is. What are you doing bringing the FBI to your father? I want anybody to explain to me what the fuck the FBI is doing in your company to go see your father. There's no explanation. You have no business contacting them. They have nothing to do with if you want to retire or not retire. So this is a ridiculous statement. You brought them there because you were in discussions of cooperating and trying to make a deal for your father. You brought him there. Your father flipped out on you and told you get the fuck out with them.
Now, John, you are known to be the muscle and the killer for the Gambinos. Now, I made a list of names. I don't think we're going to run through them all, but I got some names.
Well, is there a lot of names?
There's a lot of names.
That's why I left.
There's a lot of names, man. We're going to start with the name, if you just could tell us, the story. Paul G., you shot him in front of Gotti's house?
Gotti's mother's house, Fanny. She lived on the conduit. And
that must be personal.
That was personal. Years ago, he slapped my sister. And took me about 8 years to catch up with him. I had him before that on the beach. And the guy Gebbett brought him there. And then he told him I was going to kill him. And he let him know before I walked onto the beach. The guy started running away. And it took me 8 years to catch him after that. And his father was a detective at the time. I didn't give a fuck. Shot him. He lived because he fell in the snow. And I was a younger guy. I didn't understand that the snow coagulates the blood and doesn't let it flow. So it
kept him cold.
Kept him alive. But somebody said, I never shot him in front of Gotti's mother's house. I think they thought Gotti Jr. I'm talking about Gotti Sr.'s mother's house.
Okay.
Her name was Fanny. And John, the father, brought me in to discuss why I shot him. I explained why I shot him there. He had no problem with it.
Bruce Gotterup.
Bruce Gotterup shot a bar up called Jägermeister's. I owned the building, and the bar owner, he was trying to shake him down for $1,500 a week or $1,000 a week at that time. And he shot Ronnie One Arm, who was a captain in the family later on, gave information against me in an opening statement, shot his nephew. And then we tried to talk him down and to stay away from the bar. He didn't listen, so he ended up dead.
George Glasso.
Georgie Grasso was Johnny Gebbett's brother-in-law, and they spoke about the coke business, being involved with Gotti, and also spoke about killing me. So Gotti gave the approval to go kill him. Gotti Sr. gave the approval to go kill him. I shot him a couple of times in the head.
Mike Lavegli.
Mike Lavegli was in protocols on Atlantic Avenue with Avon Boulevard with two other guys. I was dressed in a suit and tie. One of the guys, actually, Christine Belmont's brother, I didn't know him at the time. He touched my tie. I knocked him out. Another guy said something. I put a glass over his head. Then Mike said something. And I already had a problem with Mike over a doctor that he was pressing, a Chinese doctor that was friends with us. So I shot him in the chest. I dragged him out of the building. I hit him across the face with a glass after I dragged him out. It was a drug spot that we ran called Protocols. So,
Ricky Stratton.
Ricky Stratton was one of the guys with, he's a brother-in-law of Grasso and Johnny Gebbett. There was a team of them that came looking for me to kill me. I followed him on the Interborough Parkway. I shot him twice in the head. He died a month later in the hospital. Bullet came out of his head in a hospital pillow, actually.
Nicky Pascal.
Nicky Pascal was a cousin of mine. He's half Albanian, half Italian. I put him in the drug business. I put him in the ticket business. I put him in the Shylock business. He later on went in the union business, and Gotti told me he doesn't have to answer to me. When I came out of jail, July 3rd, 1995, I went to his house. I brought him downstairs. I pistol whipped him. I shot him 4 or 5 times. He lost his leg. He's got a stomach. He's lucky he lived because he lost a lot of blood. And his first cousin was with me, and I was going to finish him because I lost my temper. I wasn't there to shoot him, but I ended up shooting him up a lot after that.
Mike Pip.
Mike Pip was with another guy, Manny, Johnny Burke's brother, Tony Burke, Junkie. They were robbing mine and John, the Gotti's drug spot on 116 and Flight. I got out of the car with 2 guys. We were going to a nightclub. They called me up, said they robbed the spot. I went with a 22 Ruger, 50-shot Ruger in a pillowcase. I got out, scope. I was on my knee, and I shot 3 of them. I picked them off one at a time. Then I walked up to him, put the gun in his mouth, and told him, "You rob my spot again, I'll kill you." Those 3 guys. And Tony Burke I let off the hook because of his punk brother, Johnny, who used to work for me.
Vito Guzzo.
Vito Guzzo was another faction, tough guy. Out of all these guys, Vito was tough. I didn't like him. I knew him since he was a kid. His cousins, the Daliandos, and we know each other. I tried to set him up to kill. I robbed a couple of his guys, stabbed Joe O'Kane, had him robbed twice. There was a kid around me that transferred over to him without my permission. Later went to Gotti for help, but we tried to kill Vito. We shot him up. He lived, and he actually killed one of the guys that I sent to kill him, Johnny Borelli. So Vito's tough. He's got balls. We just didn't like each other, opposite faction. All his old guys actually are still very good friends with me now. They were all tough guys, all that crew.
Sal Noto.
Sal Noto's brother-in-law was threatening Joe O'Kane, the kid I just said we robbed and stabbed. I did a lot for Joe O'Kane. I raised him as a kid. They threatened him, said they were going to kill him. I went inside a nightclub by myself. They were on a dance floor. I shot his brother-in-law. Went outside. I shot his other friend in the belly. That was at the Bulkhead Bar, so you know, on Myrtle Avenue.
I heard you saved Michael Capipano from a beating.
Mike Catapano was in front of Mondello's on Jamaica Avenue, 85th. I got a good memory. This is the problem why Sammy and all these guys will sit with me. They were giving him a beat, and they threw him through the window. And I pulled up, seen it, and I shot the 2 guys. He used to smoke a lot of dust. Me and Mike are still friends. And Mike's a tough guy. He's not like, he's not a killer, but he was tough with his hands when he was younger.
You shot 2 or 3 guys on your property?
They come to kill me, 5 guys. Pete Gotti knew about it, Junior. They didn't make a move to come with me. I had the underground bell system, and I drove to the house. I shot it out with a couple of them. I believe I killed 2 or 3 of them. Danny Morrow was a regular guy. His grandfather was Angelo Bruno, Philadelphia boss. He told the story about it. Dino Finelli, regular guy. I bought the property from his mother. He helped me clean up, get rid of the guns. He told the story about it. Carmen Roan, regular guy. He told the story. They were all involved somewhat in what I did there. And Stephen Larquitando. So when guys question it, it's on record. All these guys talked to FBI, made statements, did everything. Seen the blood that I left there. I had underground bell system, security system. They didn't know. I don't have cameras. I tell everybody I don't need cameras. I'm the camera. So.
You stabbed a man in the neck and the stomach in Fort Lauderdale. I think you mentioned that earlier.
That was the one Gotti talked to the lawyer. Richie Raybach was my lawyer and Gotti Sr.'s lawyer. He had him tell the lawyer he better drop those charges or that he's lucky he lived.
Did you do that in front of the police?
In front of police.
You didn't care?
I didn't care. The guy touched he touched my tie also. I walked off. I came back to talk to him. Told him, you ever do that again? He was a big guy, big steroid, 325-pound guy. And he mushed my face. I said, I asked you twice now. I said, I'll be back. And I went and got a butcher knife and put it through his neck.
You baseball batted 3 bikers and stabbed one of them.
That was Kenny Nicole was a friend of mine. Joey Matt, this regular guy.
But how the fuck you get baseball bat 3 bikers without some of them doing something
They
and
tried
stabbing
to
one.
fight back. You got to remember, most guys are cowards. They talk a lot until I went after them. They're basically defending themselves. They're not being aggressive coming at me. So one I killed. He was probably the first murder I ever did, actually. He went into a coma, never came out of it. I guess they pulled the plug on him eventually. I have no qualms about killing some of these guys. Joey Mathis was like a brother to me. He died in a car accident. He was a regular guy who was at Old Brother Inn on 78th Street, Jamaica Avenue. And they threatened him. He called me up in the middle of the night. I had a basement apartment at the time. I said, I'll be right there. I didn't call other guys. Kenny Nicole's alive. The girl, Kathy, that was the bartender, she's alive. Buddy, the owner of the bar, he's alive. So somebody could tell him I pulled up by myself in a bathrobe, actually, and a baseball bat. And baseball batted all three. And by accident, I even baseball batted Kenny Nicole. And I had to take him to a hospital out in Long Island, not near the scene, or they would have known it was me there.
John Gotti Jr. said that you shot over 60 guys.